Welcome. Welcome, everyone, to this very timely session on accelerating the deployment of nuclear energy. This is a real milestone for the World Economic Forum. This is the first publicly facing panel that's ever been hosted on nuclear energy at Davos. So it's my great honor to be moderating this session today. My name's Kirsty Gogan from TerraPraxis. So we're at a pivotal moment. We're halfway through this critical decade. 30 countries have pledged to triple nuclear capacity by 2050. Now, achieving that target would represent a construction rate of around 30 gigawatts a year, each year, for 20 years until starting in 2030. So that's very significant. And that's not all. Industrial energy users are signaling their demand for hundreds of gigawatts of clean energy to power their business-critical operations. Now, part of the appeal of this dense, compact, reliable, and clean source of heat and power is that SMRs, or manufactured heat boxes, as we would like to call them, can be co-located at coal plant sites, at refineries, with data centers, with steel, chemical, aluminium plants, to directly and competitively generate heat, power, steam, hydrogen to enable the continued operation of these assets without emissions, even potentially reversing the grid connection to enable those today's energy users to become suppliers back to the grid. And we're also seeing major financial institutions beginning to indicate an increase in access to financing, signaling a real shift in the way that capital markets are viewing nuclear energy. However, to meet the scale of this demand that we'll be discussing today for civilization scale, reliable, clean energy that could be supplied by nuclear energy, we're going to have to fundamentally transform the way that we design and deliver nuclear energy. And so that's why the World Economic Forum, working with its ecosystem of partners, including TerraPraxis, has developed a new framework that you can see here on the screen, a collaborative framework to accelerate advanced nuclear and SMR deployment. And this framework identified 9 critical areas for coordinated action, ranging from everything from developing energy policy, modernizing regulations, building diverse competitive supply chains, and catalyzing access to investment. So I really hope that you'll take the opportunity to take a look at that report. Welcome. So to discuss this, very good timing, thank you. So to discuss this really unprecedented alignment of the stars, we have a star panel for you today to really discuss how we can convert this opportunity into action. So we have Rafael Mariano Grossi, Director General of the International Atomic Energy Agency. Welcome. Ebba Busch, Deputy Prime Minister and Minister for Energy, Business and Industry for the Government of Sweden. Luc Rémont, the Chief Executive Officer of Électricité de France. Chairman Shugang, Chairman of the China Huaneng Group. And Darryl White, CEO of BMO, the Bank of Montreal Group. So let's kick off with a quick fire round, first of all. So I'd like each of you to just give me a very quick answer to the question, firstly, how ready do you think the industry really is on a scale of 1 to 10 to respond to the scale of demand? And what do you think are the key drivers that you see driving this new appetite and interest in nuclear energy? So let's begin with you, DG.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Great to be here. A few years ago, you could have had a panel called The Road to Phasing Out Nuclear Energy. Now we're having this one, so I feel better in this configuration. And I would say that what we can see being nuclear global, we cannot define in a univocal way or give you a univocal one single reply. For the chairman, maybe China would be ready and up to triple. In the West, I think we could say that there are challenges, but the industry, I think, can be up to the challenge. But certain things must change, or certain things must be done to get to that, and that has different dimensions: regulatory dimensions, financial dimensions, industrial, technological dimensions, and political dimensions as well.
But if you had to pick a number, scale of 1 to 10.
7.5.
Oh, fantastic. Thank you. Deputy Prime Minister.
Well, start off by answering the question, why the shift?
Yes.
And I would say that it's for me, it's three things. It's facts, it's physics, and it's the need for, I think it's the returned appetite for hope, need of hope for the future. And I'll try to be really brief, but facts. We now see figures saying that we will at least have a doubling of electricity demand. Some showcases 2.5 even times the electricity needed compared to what we have now. And how do you do that? How do you have high set climate targets and still drive economic growth at the same time? Is it even possible? Well, the Swedish answer is yes, but then you have to have a lot of electricity. And our answer is it has to be fossil free. So that's the facts part. The other one is, I've said this in a few other settings, I'm on a global mission to take politics out of energy policy and put physics back in. Because it's really hard to do a competitive green transition without a lot of base load. Dispatchable energy that is there 24/7, 365 days a year. You're not going to be able to electrify your heavy industry, and Sweden has a lot of that. So that's physics. And the third part is, I think a lot of the policymaking has come from a place of fear for climate change, migration, war, pandemics. There has been, and the world is a quite scary place, but I think people need to be able to see that there is hope for the next generation, that times can actually be better in the years to come, and that's where nuclear power comes as a very realistic answer. Industry, I think, is at a 9. Financing is now turning slowly up. We see some of the heavier investments, investors and banks globally now putting money behind new investments in nuclear, maybe up at a 7 now. And policymakers, me and my friends, we're still just at a 5, I think. We have to make the decision. Is it more important that it is dispatchable at any given second and that it is fossil free? Or is it that we can put a very specific label, other label on it? And I think we still have a journey to go there.
Great, very inspiring, thank you. Luke?
Thank you very much. Well, as Rafael and the Minister have said already, 7.5 and 9, I cannot say less than that. As an electrician, first I would like to applaud the laws of physics coming back into the middle of the rules. I think that's really what we need. We want to go low carbon. If we want to go low carbon, we need to supply 24/7 in electricity so that the demand of electricity takes the risk of going to electricity. For this, we need dispatchable power, and among low-carbon dispatchable power, the one that is sizable is nuclear. Then, as a nuclear industry, EDF is, unfortunately, the only company who develops, constructs, finances, and owns and operates in Europe since 20 years. Yes, we have been facing some headwinds, including some political headwinds for a number of years. Now, we are at the point where I think our manufacturing industry is totally ready, totally ready to manufacture all the components that are going into nuclear power plants. We are still not yet at full pace on construction, and what makes the difference between manufacturing and construction is that we manufacture because we manufacture a lot also to operate many reactors. Now, we are ready to manufacture for more new reactors, but we need to learn back. As we did before, we used to be connecting to the grid 5 reactors per year back 30 years ago. Now our Chinese friends are doing 10 per year. But in the meantime, the West has stopped to deliver new reactors. So we need to accelerate the pace of construction by repeating the same thing and not reinventing the wheel from one reactor to the next. That's one of the pains that we have been facing. And for this, the industry needs to work as a system. The system means including nuclear safety authorities. If we can have a common view of nuclear safety authorities within Europe, for example, the scale is there. Then we will replicate. If we don't have that, we will reinvent the wheel from one country to the next. And it's going to be a pain, which is what we have done over the last 2 decades. So that's on the nuclear safety side. Then on the construction side, we need, of course, to scale from one reactor to the next, which is what we are doing today in the UK. When we duplicate the reactor, on the second one, we gain 30% lead time. And so on and so forth. And if we go there, we are going to target to be as competitive as our Chinese friends on building fast. They build very fast now because they do a lot. If we do a lot, we will be there. And it will not take a decade to get there. So that's why on construction, we still have to accelerate. We have to take the challenge, but we will deliver the challenge. So we have set the challenge for the next series of 6 that we are going to build, which is 70 months from first nuclear concrete to delivery. That's a huge challenge, but we take it.
And it's historically what both France and Sweden have achieved in the past. I mean, France built more than 50 reactors in 15 years, historically. And indeed, this is what China is doing today.
Yeah, thanks, Kirsty. Sorry, I will speak in Chinese. I think 刚才雷蒙董事长先
I think Luc Rémont has actually answered for me. Just a moment while you put your headphones on. And as I was just saying, I think Luc Rémont has already said what I was going to say. Let me come in first on the nuclear confidence issue. I think when it comes to China, I can rank China with 10 points. When it comes to operating and construction and approval, those under approval, we have 113 gigawatts in the pipeline or in existence. So if we take the 1st of January 2025, that was the date that the new China energy law came into force. And that is a law that calls for active and orderly development of nuclear power, and it also talks about the safe use of nuclear power. Moving to the global level, I would agree with a point level of between 9 and 10. Now, if you talk about the main drivers of increased interest, I think there are 3 of them in particular. Firstly, we have more of the public that is aware of how low carbon nuclear energy is. If we talk about life cycle emissions, per kilowatt of power, you have a very low level of carbon emissions, possibly even lower than wind and photovoltaic. So it is becoming increasingly clear to a lot of people that nuclear is low carbon. Factor number 2, it's a technical factor. The industry, such as EDF and others, are all using the most cutting-edge technology to ensure safety, and the regulators are now holding us to the highest standards as well. So there is even more of a safeguard when it comes to safety. Thirdly, diversity. As Kirsty, you mentioned, we can't just get electricity from nuclear power, but we can also use it to produce heat and hydrogen. So it can not only supply base load electricity demand, but nuclear energy is also a very good choice when it comes to safe provision of energy. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. And yes, indeed, I think this is certainly one of the key reasons why we're seeing this incredible appetite from industrial energy users for energy services beyond just power, that also for heat and steam and hydrogen. However, how do we respond to that demand? I'm very curious now, Darryl, to hear, we've heard some very optimistic perspectives on the readiness of the nuclear industry. How ready is the industry to respond from the finance perspective?
So Kirsty, I'm going to give you a little bit of a balance in this equation, which I think is really important that we level set. I think the shift that we've seen in the last 5 and 6 years has been profound, important. It's almost shocking, isn't it, that this is the first, you said it was the first public panel that we've had at the World Economic Forum on nuclear, and to that I say it's about time. That said, the alignment that we need to see across the board, I suspect we'll find lots of friends with these arguments in rooms like this, but we don't have them everywhere in the world yet, and we do need to see across the board stakeholderism on the key features that we've been hearing about today, baseload reliability, the fact that we've got at-scale projects that are built on time, on budget, the fact that we've got a shift in many places, and I commend you for talking about carbon-free as opposed to 100% renewable. 100% carbon-free absolutely has a place for nuclear. The challenge is we don't have full alignment on frameworks and taxonomies. And we see it developing. We see some progress in many, many places, don't we? But we don't see it everywhere. And I'll flip to the financing part of the challenge, which I'll let you keep moving here, Kirsty, with the panel. I'll give you a conclusion on the number. But I'm really only at a 6 out of 10. And I think the reason for that is the way we need to get the enormous challenge of financing behind these projects over the course of the next 25 years is probably understated and probably misunderstood by many participants in the ecosystem. And I'm happy to unpack that for you later as to what I think it will take to unlock that and perhaps get me off of a 5 or a 6 up into the 7s or 8s, but I think it's a really critical component of the equation.
Great, thank you very much. So, I think it seems like the nuclear technology itself is very well demonstrated, and the industry has really an impeccable record in terms of operating the existing nuclear fleets. But the kind of expansion that we're seeing the need for globally now, maybe it's more in the business models, in the licensing models, in the financing models that we need to see developments, and indeed in policy. So DG Grossi, the IAEA is obviously providing a lot of leadership globally, working with newcomer countries and existing countries, and indeed with industrial energy users interested in expanding global nuclear energy supply. Tell us a bit about the way that you're working with these stakeholders and some of the big challenges that you're encountering that need to be addressed.
What we are trying to do is addressing the challenges.
Yes.
What goes well, goes well. The thing is, what can we do to facilitate and to solve these knots that we have to untie? And here we have to look at, industry we just heard. Still, I think in terms of standardization, Luc was really hitting the nail on the head when he was saying that we need to move. Of course, industry will never be absolutely univocal and unique, but when you have constant changes and reinventions all the time, it's very difficult. It's very difficult. So I think the scaling up needs that. Standardization is important, especially when you look at precisely different models, competition, healthy competition, which needs to be there, of course, but where a lot of room exists for co-sharing, many things that are not being done at the scale they should be done. So this is why we open a dialogue at the IAEA to do this, to try to facilitate, to elicit this kind of exchange. And we are not there yet. So that is what. And then it's the regulation. And this is very important, and I'm not trying to get the industry off the hook, but say that regulation may be a problem, and we should not be afraid, especially me being more on the normative side. In Latin they have this, when you study law, summum jus, summa injuria. A lot of law could be a problem. You have to have the right dose of things. So norms that ensure the highest safety standards that is correct, but not a justification for every step you take. If you took that approach to other industries, we wouldn't have seen the degree of progress we've seen in airspace and in many other things. Again, I don't want to be iconoclastic here and say that we need strong regulation, yes, but we need these sectors to talk to each other, to talk more, and also to recognize, as industry does, industry transforms itself. Regulation must also transform itself and recognize that we are having a different business model. For example, SMRs or MRs, things that you're going to be buying in the United States or in China and using in, I don't know, Burkina Faso. Why not? So for that, we need this kind of more ambitious, not rush, but ambitious, serious, and meticulous look, but with a way forward. And this is what the IAEA is trying to do in these processes, where we bring together, which was not happening. What was not happening, we had industry with their fora, with their associations, or you have the regulators in their own fora, basically talking about each other and past each other, but not talking to each other. And this is what we are trying to do.
So it's really a new era.
It is.
As the IEA report recently said, for nuclear energy, there's new markets, new products are emerging, a need for modernization that's appropriate to the speed and scale of the demand that we're seeking to address here and the broad variety of use cases. So Deputy Prime Minister, Sweden is providing real leadership right now in Europe. Obviously, you've changed your policy from a nuclear phase-out to actively pursuing a nuclear expansion, which is very exciting. Tell us what you see as the highest priorities to achieve that over the next sort of 10 years.
Yeah, most certainly, gladly to. Well, so Sweden is really making a nuclear power comeback. We have a lot of nuclear power today. We have a 98% fossil-free or carbon-free electricity production in Sweden today, but we've set a high and ambitious goal of reaching net zero by 2045. That means we will at least double our electricity consumption, and then we have to add a lot of that base load in terms of nuclear. And first of all, I hope that there are some listening here that are interested in investing in Sweden, because we now have a very interesting financing model on the table that we will push forward to our parliament this spring, consisting of 3 parts, because I think this is putting actions behind the words, or saying we'd like to welcome new nuclear, but how?
Yes.
When there has not been a proper financing case in at least not a lot of the Western countries, to be fair, speaking of the speediness of our dear Chinese, in terms of financing projects that has an 80 or 100-year horizon. That has been very difficult to back with financing. It consists of 3 parts. It's a state loan, first of all. The other part is long-term contracts for difference. And then there's a third part with a risk-sharing mechanism. I'm not going to go into detail with that. That will be pushed through the parliament this spring. And then will be open for business. But the second point I'd like to make, and I thought about this a lot when I was chairing the Road to New Nuclear, a big conference in Paris this fall together with NEA. We were happy to be able to be in Paris. And then I reflected a little bit on the issue on either we do this together, either we go faster and we go together, or we don't go at all. And this is probably more of a European perspective, but I'd like to emphasize this because I've been, during the Swedish EU presidency, for example, I don't know how many issues got stuck between my lovely dear friends of Germany, my lovely dear friends of France, when it came to, is nuclear welcome? And we have in Sweden the most installed renewables of all countries in Europe, apart from Denmark. We struggle with the first process. I love wind power, but it's intermittent. It comes and goes. It's asynchronous power production, which operates completely different in the system. And there is no political willpower in the world, no matter how good I am at giving grand speeches, that can override the basic rules of physics, once again. It will operate differently. It will give me different qualities in the system. It also provides for very different financing cases. A lot of the money globally has gone into supporting intermittent power productions, which means business cases where you have electricity production that operates completely different in the system. And I think this is also a reason why we will see money return to baseload, no matter whether that is nuclear or hydropower or something else. But I think this is especially important for Europe. If it's carbon-free, pave way for it.
Yeah.
And this is an issue where, and that's why I gave policymakers only a 5 in my rating, because there is still too much quarrel. And there is too much of, I want my name on the type standard approval. There should be a Busch type standard approval. So it's going to be completely unique, so I can put my name on it. I think there comes a time in life where things has to be bigger than one nation. It most certainly has to be bigger than one policymaker. And once again, you go together and you go much faster than things are going now, or you're not going to go at all. If you build one at a time, every time, it's going to be, I'm not going to say the word, super expensive.
Yes.
And it's going to be too lengthy. And that's if we work together and decide, okay, this is good enough, then we can get the tempo up, and then we can also get more money and get the wheels rolling in this.
So the mantra is move from projects to products, standardization, standardization, and I know EDF is successfully delivering new builds, large-scale light water reactors in multiple markets around the world, and each one is different because of the regulatory requirements being different in each country. But you are planning to leverage the learnings from those new builds. Luc, tell us about the fleet of new builds that you're planning to deliver in France and the way that you'll apply.
Sure, with pleasure. Well, we can dare to say successfully, though painfully, at this stage. That's fine to say that. I mean, we didn't have to build enough over the last 20 years to be able to scale it. And each time that we had to build one, we had to reinvent it partially. And partially means totally. That's the reality.
Indeed.
So that's exactly what we have to overcome. So now we are approaching the next series as a fleet. And of course, we count on the ramp up of the productivity of construction, essentially, also of manufacturing, but it's essentially construction, so that we deliver that at pace. And that's how we are going to succeed in delivering together. We don't intend to do that just on our own, as the French thing, because we know, exactly as you said, if we dare to do that as a French thing, we're going to be too small. That's it.
Yeah.
So we want to build that at least with our European partners, building a supply chain that embraces our European partners, and of course building a construction industry that will be able to deliver the same kind of reactors all across Europe. That's really the goal that we have. Of course, we need to build the projects one by one, and that's where we have discussions with all the promoters, developers, and of course policymakers of each of the geographies. And that's by lining this up that we will be able to start.
Yes.
Now, the other point that I wanted to mention is that the good news since 5-6 years is that nuclear is back in the middle of the game, because exactly for the reasons that you mentioned, we need baseload. With nuclear being back in the middle of the game, we see our industry again attractive, with talent, with innovation, with new type of ideas, new project. Frankly, this is great to see this coming to our industry. I cannot say enough how alone you feel in an industry that is against headwinds, and we are the only company left. So welcome to everyone. Welcome. We're going to try to work as well as we can with everyone who wants to partner. But the objective is let's take this with a true industrial approach, because only scale will make it happen. So let's start as soon as we can and then scale it. That's, in my view, the rule for success.
Very good, thank you. And then, of course, that's why we're also really happy to be here partnering with the World Economic Forum and expanding that ecosystem even further. Now, Chairman Wen,
yes.
You've obviously already perfected the delivery of standardized thermal generation coal plants to achieve very low costs and very high rates of deployment for thermal generation, including coal and nuclear in China. But you've also achieved very recently a very historic milestone in the first commercial operation of a high-temperature gas reactor that produces steam at 500 degrees C, which enables substitution of coal burning in industrial uses and petrochemical uses. So congratulations on
Thank
that.
you.
And please tell us about how you'll be leveraging this learning in the further development of SMRs.
首先 ，Kirsty，
First of all, Kirsty, I would like to make a clarification. Huaneng Group not only has a very high speed in the thermal sector, and also over the past years, we have been very fast in renewable development. In Paris, we also mentioned that over the last 2 years, in 2023, 2024, the newly added PV and wind exceeded 20 gigawatt. In 2023, 21 gigawatt. In last year, 23 gigawatt. So today we have in total 260 gigawatt of renewable energies. And this includes PV, wind, plus hydro. Hydropower actually has 50% of the renewable energy, total share of the renewable energy. You also mentioned that at the end of 2023, we have successfully built the first HTGR commercial operation. Last May, the DG of IEA also visited on the spot of this HTGR operation. We believe that, first of all, we have make the first step and taking it out of the lab and reached commercial operation. And it has a capacity of 200 gigawatt. And over the past year, we believe that, first of all, the HTGR enjoys inherent safety. It does not need any external emergency cooling. This is proven. This is first feature. Secondly, as I mentioned, it has broad prospects for comprehensive utilization. We're still at the early stage. You mentioned about the high temperature of 541 degrees. As you mentioned, it can produce superheated steam with a temperature of 541 degrees. And moving forward, it can also be used in various sectors such as petrochemical, etc. And also, this station started to provide heating for the local residents. So from this perspective, we believe it has a broad prospect of comprehensive utilization. And also it has the potential to reuse the existing infrastructure. As you know, we have a lot of thermal plants, and in the future, we can replace the coal-fired boiler of the decommissioned thermal plants and making use of existing infrastructure. Thank you.
Fantastic. I think that is so fundamental for the scale of the transition that's needed to be able to repurpose our existing assets, enabling continued operation competitively without emissions will be fundamental to minimize disruption to the global economy and make the transition feasible. So Darryl, let me turn to you. BMO is the 8th largest bank in North America, $1.8 trillion in assets. You underwrote the first green bonds for nuclear, which was 6 times oversubscribed, sort of indicating the level of interest there. And I think last year you added nuclear, made a very significant addition of nuclear to your sustainable bonds framework. I'd love to hear more about, what you think, given this sort of emerging shift in investors' thinking that we're seeing, what really needs to happen to make nuclear more investable?
Kirsty, I'm glad you framed it as an emerging shift, because that's exactly the point I want to leave people with, which is this is not a circumstance, as much as the business case sounds very sound, and it is very sound, where if we just build it, they will come. And I want to explain what I mean by that. And I'll give you a good news homegrown story, but then I will try to explain the scale of the challenge and the scale of the problem. The problem that we're trying to solve is two things at the same time, aren't we? We're trying to solve large-scale new builds of reactors and retrofit and rebuilds of existing reactors at the same time as an ecosystem that needs to finance the SMRs. Fine. If I tell you the story of a homegrown success story, Canada has a little bit of ground zero in terms of nuclear development. 50 or 60 years ago, we developed the nuclear reactor. We're the second largest producer, the CANDU nuclear reactor. They were the second largest producer of uranium on the planet. And last year, pardon me, early in 2003, you referred to the first ever green nuclear financing that's ever been done in the world, which our firm underwrote. And it was for a company called Bruce Power, which is the largest, as the folks here would know, the largest operator of nuclear reactors in the world in my home province of Ontario. And I will say stewarded expertly by our friends from Realis who are in the room as well. That's all great. We went to market. We underwrote the bond. We had the classification of green in the taxonomy. We had investors for all over the world. And you mentioned we were oversubscribed. We came back. We've done it more times, and we've issued more over the last couple of years, which is a great news story that we've kicked that door open and we've shown that the capital markets will be an active participant in the funding that's going to be required to do this. Great. $2 billion. Maybe with 5 or 6 times oversubscribed, we've got $10 billion that I've demonstrated that we've got demand. Capital is completely fungible. Some of these projects will be built and engineered and developed regionally, but capital will move globally. These financings were done with global investors. Over the course of the time to triple the capacity that we need to get to by 2050, if we're going to do 30 megawatts per year, that will require, anybody want to guess at the number? Not the experts on the panel, but anyone want to guess how much money I need? You need? We need? Probably, we don't know, but to use a really round, convenient number, it's probably around $5 trillion. So high five, good for us. I've got less than 0.1% done, and I've got to convince the rest of the world that we've got to do more and more and more of this. And yes, we're going to use the balance sheets of governments, thank you. Yes, we're going to use the balance sheets of banks directly. But when you're talking about long-term capital that is large in ticket size, probably investment grade, but is still developing, you asked what's going to enable. We have to give those investors more and more confidence and certainty on the delivery of the projects. And so if you think of a spectrum of an investor's risk appetite, from something where I'll roll the dice over here and maybe it'll be a home run and maybe it won't, to I need absolute certainty, we're about as close to that as you can get. So I made the point earlier, alignment everywhere on the taxonomy, green being part of the frameworks. We don't have that yet. Giving certainty on the returns, things like the regulated asset-based models, the contracts for difference that were referred to earlier, the demand aggregation partnerships are going to be really important, because the investor's not going to come to the table if there's an uncertain outcome when the energy is produced. They will come to the table if we can continue to put as many of these tools into the bucket as we possibly can. So my message is, do not underestimate the size of this challenge. We've gotten it going. It's really reassuring. But you're not going to get there. We cannot get there without the participation of global capital markets. And these tools are going to be absolutely necessary, not optional.
Excellent, thank you. We're going to take a question now from the floor. And oh, I see, I knew this would happen. So we only have 5 minutes left, everybody. So I would love to take a couple of questions. We also have 2 really extraordinary success stories that we'd love to have time to share with you. So let's take 1 or 2 questions here. So do we have a mic? Please, if you could be super brief.
I try to keep it super brief. Michael Süß, CEO and Chairman of Oerlikon. So material-wise, much of interest in that story. But it was as well 8 years running Siemens Energy in a very hot period. My simple question is, do we talk on 3rd generation pressurized and boiled water reactors still? Or going with the 4th generation? First, second, how we deal, we had somehow 450 big nuclear power plants still same amount. They will phase out the next 20 years. That's 10% of the global production. We have to replace that before we think about doubling or tripling.
Yeah.
How we get that convoy solutions again, as we had in the 60s, 70s, where we built probably 3-4 power plants a year, instead of building 19 years for one power plant. And last but not least, at least the last 5 Western power plants, all of them, been 5 times, 6 times out the money. So how we learn the lessons out of that, and have we learned it? Because then, and I was always very positive to nuclear, but there are significant questions. I'm not really sure if you have the answer already. So I was wondering about the 9 and 10 on being industrial ready.
Great, thank you very much. Well, we do, Mr. Al-Hamadi, you were involved in the announcement of the tripling nuclear energy capacity, which will require those rates of deployment we started off with in the beginning of the discussion, 30 gigawatts per year, every year. Tell us a bit about your experience recently in the UAE and how we could learn from that to achieve those rates of deployment.
Thank you, Kirsty. I'm very honored also and pleased to be here. So if I maybe just couple comments on the panel discussion, then I will go back to the UAE and our success story. So today, electrification, I think Ebba Busch mentioned that.
But very briefly.
Come
very
again?
briefly.
Sure. So the demand is serious, and we have seen that demand. So this will force government and regulators to be optimistic on the development of design. In the UAE today, we have 4 reactors operational, and we are very proud to say that we have 25% of the UAE electricity coming from those 4 reactors. The opportunity is big, so be it Gen 3 reactors or Gen 4 reactors, the opportunity is there. We have to act on it. And UAE success story today, we've done it on budget, we've done it on also on time. So we look forward to investment in Sweden and other countries to take our success story from UAE to the world.
Great, wonderful, thank you. And I'll come back to the panel to answer the question in a moment, but we have with us Christopher Womack, who's the president and CEO of Southern Company as well. Please.
Yeah, thank you very much. And Southern Company was pleased to bring in the two new nuclear units online in the U.S., the first new units in the last 30 years. And so once again, I think have successfully demonstrated the ability to get this work done. And the incredible lessons that we've learned, I think, sets up the United States to continue to advance, to bring on additional new nuclear to respond to the needs that we have with the new capacity that is needed, but also to align with our net zero goals by 2050. So we are very optimistic in our country about the future of nuclear. We see more license extensions, but we also see additional uprates. I mean, so just a lot of positive action on nuclear in the U.S. as we go forward. So thank you very much.
Well, congratulations. Thank you for that. We have to start somewhere. Would anyone like to take the question regarding the... Yes, please.
Yeah, maybe very quick answer. So are we talking about third generation or something else? Well, if we are talking about terawatt hours at scale, we are primarily talking first about third generation at scale. And then, of course, moving on to the next gen, which still have to prove their case on can we have one reactor that operates before it scales to something else. But for the foreseeable future, if we want to answer the level of demand of electricity that is going to come in baseload, we are on third generation at scale. Second, can that be sufficient to supply versus the potential withdrawal of existing reactors? I don't think that the existing reactors are going to be taken out of the grid in the next 20 years. At least from the ones we operate, we don't think that any of them doesn't have the potential to go beyond 60 years. So by taking a great care of these reactors, really great care of these reactors, we can extend their lifetime.
It's the lowest cost way to add clean energy to your grid is through life extensions. Deputy Prime Minister, do you have any comments on conventional nuclear versus advanced reactors?
Just to add on a comment on whether we go large-scale conventional reactors or whether we go SMRs. On behalf of Sweden, what makes most sense to the system would be to start off with large-scale conventional ones. That's what we know. That's what we need in terms of magnitude. That's what would make most use of all of that renewable power that we have in the system. That would be so much more easy to transmit and move around in the system. We're a great, wonderful country, but very, very elongated one. And we have some of our very heavy industry in the northern part. We have all of our people, inhabitants in the southern part. More baseload into the system means we can also make much more use of the wind power. So that's one point. The other one is I would love to see others looking at Sweden as a possible sort of entry or core of a nuclear hub around the Baltic Sea area. In a perfect world, I would go together hand in hand with all of my friends around the Baltic Sea, and we would buy 10 to 15 SMRs together at the same time. And then we would roll out a full program on how to collaborate universities, make sure we have the skill, the people building the first one, accumulating that knowledge until we build the next one, and so forth. I think you get the point. And I think it's that type of collaboration that we need. We have a setup to collaborate with the US on nuclear power. We have a setup to work together with Canada, a memorandum of understanding to work on nuclear and the full value chain where it comes to that. My ask of you and people listening in the room, challenge us. Challenge Sweden, because the perfect situation and what is to strive for is if one reactor is approved in France, it should be approved in Sweden. If one reactor is approved in Sweden, it should be approved in Finland, in Canada, and so forth. And that's what we're looking at. But we need more concrete challenges on the table. But that's how I view sort of the succession on the large-scale conventional walls and the SMRs.
Wonderful. A collaborative framework. Just you're in the right place. That's what so we have one. I think we have time for one more quick question. I've been given a couple of minutes extra time. Oh,
okay.
We may not get to everybody.
My name is Tatsuya. I'm from Japan, and Japan went through the Fukushima nuclear accident. But I would like to share with you the recent developments. The Japanese government issued its new strategic energy plan. And now, after Fukushima, it was reducing our dependence on nuclear as much as possible. Now the position is keep the necessary capacity and including building new ones. So if Japan can make this shift, other countries can make this shift as well. But we are facing a lot of problems. Financing is one problem. There's another problem of liability. After Fukushima, there is unlimited liability. So I would like to ask Darryl Grossi, what's the landscape of this liability issue among various countries? And if there is advice to us to introduce limited liability, that will be very helpful. But it's politically very challenging after Fukushima. Finally, in order to triple nuclear capacity, we have to reach out to the emerging economies.
Yes.
But one thing, for financing, they cannot get financing for the multilateral development banks, like World Banks or agent-bailed banks, yes. That financing policy would have to change, and that would require Europeans, US, Japan, and others to change the policy. Thank you very much.
You know, liability is one of the most complex, arcane, boring themes that you can imagine. You have lawyers talking about, but let me simplify it by saying that on liability, like on regulation, and what you were saying, Deputy Prime Minister, unfortunately, we don't have the situation when a reactor licensed in Sweden will be licensed in France. And this is what we are trying to get the regulators to do. And it's very difficult. It's very, very difficult. And on liability, it is the same. We have no less than 3 regimes on liability. We have the Paris regime, the Vienna regime, and an attempt to have a unified regime under a convention of supplementary compensation. I don't want to get into too legal things, but to say that this is also part of the same thing, that we have been dealing with an industry that was in decay all right? So the issue was not a big issue. Now we have a completely different scenario where we have the post-Fukushima trauma in terms of liability, not in other things, and we need to have a more compatible regime. Work is being done, and I think there is a regime, which is the CSC regime. We can continue the conversation if you want, that provides for that.
Wonderful, thank you so much. Well, unfortunately, we have run out of time, but this is just the beginning of the conversation. So please join me in thanking our very distinguished panel for their wonderful comments. Thank you.